Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Good afternoon to you all. I would like to begin by thanking all of you for sacrificing the time to come and be part of this discussion. I want to let you know again that this conversation or economic dialogue has been organized by the Bulawayo Global Shepherds community in collaboration with the North American space. The main objectives that we, as the Global Shepherds, I would like to first of all pose a question to you all. who can just tell us what global shepherds are all about. Anyone has just came across with what global shepherds are all about? Anyone? So, you mean no one has ever heard about us, global shepherds? But I'm very much aware that some of you may not be aware that we once had another dialogue with His Excellency, the President of Zimbabwe, Emerson Mnangagwa, which was tackled the road disaster. You remember yes, so we're also part of that community. Global Shepherds basically is a group of young people in different cities. Currently there are about more than 158 cities internationally, and we have what we call hubs. In some cities in Zimbabwe, we only have two hubs, the Bulawayo hub and the Harare hub. But basically what you should understand is these hubs are a group of people who have come together, young people, who are interested to be part of the conversation that is content in policy decision making and shape the state of their cities, and so doing be part of the economic, political, and other things that are important for bringing about change in the world and in our cities. So this conversation or this dialogue that we organized today was in line with that. And our theme is to discuss the state of the Zimbabwean economy today. And with us here, we invited a number of panelists who are going to have all the policies that have been announced since the post-election period, discuss these economic policies and try to find whether they are now working or not working and how much Zimbabwe is benefited from it, especially the young people who are us. So some of the objectives, the first objective was to obtain a comprehensive understanding of the economic state of Zimbabwe and also to assess the effectiveness of the current economic policies, and also to analyze the impact of the austerity measures. And last but not least, is to also forge a positive youth and community participation in the mainstream economy. So, in summary, this economic dialogue that we organize seems to make sure, or to us as young people, to find our space and see how the economic policies that have been announced are benefiting the young people and the generality of Zimbabwe. With this, I thank you. I hope you are all going to enjoy. And remember, this is a discussion, so make sure that by the end of the day, you also say something. Thank you.
Good afternoon. How are you? Guys, some tears. Tears, just because I think about economics and everything. Don't tears. So my name is Unile, and half a member, and I'll introduce my panelists, the panelists for this dialogue today. So I'll start with the gentleman. Yes, I'll put in the gentleman. All right, he is Maurice Mbala. He's the managing director of More Capital. You should like this. And next to him is Terence Mugora. He's the co-founder and director of Educators. And next to him is Being Derele. He's the CEO for Innovation for Africa. And the only lady on our panel is Mrs. Bebe. She is the programs officer for NAS American Space. She's a Chevening scholar, and she's also a Mandela Washington Fellow. So So without wasting much of your time, I'll just dive into the questions. And my first question, we'll talk about the environment in our country. Is it really conducive for investment? When we're talking about businesses, if someone wants to start up a business or someone already has a business, is it really conducive for someone to have a business in this environment? And the floor is on our panel. Anyone can just stand in. Maybe Morris?
I thought you said to the floor.
I know, on the floor, the panel.
Come on here. Are you saying I'm supposed to be the first person to speak?
No, I'm just looking at you and I want to
All right. I'll one of that. It's not a very kind question to ask under the circumstances right now. I think the Zimbabwe situation, the way I look at it, probably is the best time to be alive. Why am I saying that? You're going to find solutions to what's happening right now. You would have made it big. So that's the way I look at it. And then on the flip side is, if you're in business, the challenges are on the part side, and that creates a bit of a challenge in terms of being there. And now you got to choose whether you want to work or you want to work for. You want to employ or you want to get employed. So when you look in terms of the investments, okay, generally in terms of investment, if you're looking like for foreign direct investment, that's another issue. Or you can just look at internal investment, where amongst yourself you're trying to cultivate, or investing into a certain business as it were. So I think by and large, the environment is 50-50. It creates an opportunity for you to rise up and do what needs to be done. Why do I say that? Because in Zimbabwe right now, it's not like a straight line. Where everything else is like clear cut. It offers challenges to say for you to be able to be where you're supposed to be. It might take you 20 years. But right now in Zimbabwe, you've got a solution. Probably talk to Terence. Nature's your solution, or there's a bee there. Kindness is your solution. Work out here on the other side of it. But now, the challenge will be now how to maintain once you've been, on upper echelons of food chain. So that's a challenge. So by and large, I think it gets to with his mind, whether is it conducive or not.
If I could jump in on that, I think it's like Morris said, it's an interesting question to want to answer. And I'll go at it from one as a person in business and that started a business in an environment, I think, where things were already looking a bit pear-shaped. So it's not a great environment if you want to start easy, but business is never easy, right? And this is a great time because the challenges, you don't have to look for them that much. They're in your face, day in, day out, you're facing them. And the question now becomes, do you have the entrepreneur's mindset to then think, how do I fix this? And when I'm fixing this, am I willing to develop that long game? Because you may not get that overnight success. You won't get, what other markets enjoy where they've got all this funding support that if I have an idea, I can get runway funding for a year or two just to develop the idea. Yet, you do it and you have to do it and make it work well when it's still small. So it's a difficult environment when it comes to raising money because there are a couple of things that are difficult with this environment. If you want to raise money from outside, the question is always, how is the person who's investing in you going to get their money back? Because no one just invests in you just for the sake of it. There's always that expectation for a return in investment. So if it's a financial return in investment, you've got fears of, okay, this money came in, like if we received an investment in 2014, that came in as US dollars, right? And that came in as a gift. Now in 2019, after February, that US dollar debt now just ballooned by a factor of what? 2.5, 3.5. Can you see what it does to your business? So there's lots of uncertainty in our current market, in that you're not too sure. And I think it scares away some investment that likes safer investment. But the potential for a return is also very high, because I think wherever there are problems, there's money to be made in finding solutions. So for me, yes, in that you've got more things that you can aim for to solve, and a bit of no in that when you, in the process of solving it, you're not going to get the assistance in the way that other markets enjoy. Like accessing capital internationally, we stopped even bothering ourselves because everyone would ask you the simple question, if I give you my currency today, how am I going to get it out and back to me in a year or two's time? So you find that a lot of our investment now, we look for it domestically. But domestically, there are only a few companies or a few individuals that are able to sort of finance business. So it's one of those things where you have to begin to look at ideas that scale on themselves or ideas that can become broader than this.
Probably just for some perspective here, if you want to tell us what line of business you're
What line of business?
just a brief introduction from all of you would be helpful.
Okay, so you want me to start?
Yeah, that's good.
Cool. Right, great. So I run what we call an education access and people improvement company. So we're using financial services to get people into house. It's loans, scholarships, and stuff that does people development. So boot camps and events. I hope that sort of gives you a bit of
Financial literacy.
So financial services, so loans and financial literacy.
Just call me Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, I prefer that. How do I do? I'm a pseudo farmer. I'm a economist in terms of economics, and also MOB runs. Sorry? Precisely, yeah. You've got all markets are there. And then also MOB Capital, which is like microfinance. Microfinance is a bit of a different stint to it, which is got advisory services, insurance, all in one, not just the lending aspect of it. So in the nutshell, that's what it's for my job.
So I run a marketing agency, focusing mostly on web development and systems development. And I've also set up an innovation hub. It's a virtual hub that's multi-disciplines, just to kind of accelerate these sorts of conversations and to develop it nice as well.
Okay, I'm a program coordinator here. I coordinate the programs or events that happen here. I'm not an economist, I don't have a background in the economy, but I'm a farmer and I run an online media platform called Amaposigazi. It's a women's media platform that tries to ensure that women have a say in discussions like this. Just to ensure that their side or their view is heard on whatever national debates are ongoing. I'm not sure why they decided to invite me, but I hope I'll do justice to the topic.
Alright, does anyone else have any contribution to the question that I posed to the panel?
So maybe I could jump in before the questions start flying in. I just wanted to, when I was asked to come and talk, my first instinct was to refuse. But then as you can see, I'm not an economist, I don't have any background in finance, but I'm the only woman here, which means everyone else that is a woman that was asked couldn't make it. So I had to come and say something, and my question was, actually the question for this debate was, or not a debate, a discussion was, the state of Zimbabwe's economy, sustaining industry development and inclusive growth in the economic status. My question was, the inclusivity part, how are women included in this economy? It's always my first question when we're talking about things, how are women impacted by certain actions, by certain policies? And so many decisions have been made, and I've always asked myself, how do women come in? Your first question was, what is the environment like? I think for me, the environment is characterized by four main things. A backdrop of corruption, a backdrop of poor governance, a backdrop of nepotism and cronyism, and a backdrop of international disengagement or poor international relations. So practically, to a lay person, if you're in a relationship, if you're married, and there is no trust in this marriage already, there is infidelity in this marriage already, and then in the midst put an STI, what does that do? It worsens the situation. Or even if you're in a business partnership, you don't trust each other, there is no accountability systems in this business, and then in the midst you put a debt problem, one of the partners goes into serious debt or has a gambling problem, the problem is it will collapse. So these backdrops for me, plus the Zimbabwe, this downward spiraling situation in Zimbabwe's economy, the exchange rate, the rise in fuel prices and basic commodities generally, the poor livelihoods, the poor salaries, has just made it so unbearable. And for me, it has even impacted worse on the biggest chunk of the population, who are unfortunately the most marginalized. These are our young people. The UNFPA says Zimbabwe is an extremely young population with 62% young people. And the majority are women. So this means a majority of young women are in poverty. We've read the metro, it says women are the most affected by HIV and AIDS, and especially in this part of the country, they are the most affected by poverty. Not only are they the most poor, they are also the most affected by poverty. So it's two-pronged. You can be in your own corner surviving, but the poverty around you will affect more if you are a woman than if you are a man. So those contexts for me make the status quo in us so difficult for women to be included in this economy. When we talk of corruption, for example, the decisions that are made that will make someone be chosen because they are related to some person or they are a friend to some person over someone who's qualified and skilled in that job means that so many mistakes will be done in that job that will cost the taxpayer money to correct those wrongs. Let me give you an example, the ZESA scandal. I know it's still in the courts, it's still debatable, but we know money changed hands. We know there's something sinister that happened with that tender with the Bulawayo champ. All that money that could have gone to social services and the improvement of our energy. If you look down the chain, who does it impact the most? When there are power cuts, who has to go out and fetch firewood? Who has to stay up late burning the midnight oil? Who has to study in the candlelight? If, for example, you have chores in your household, who's most likely to do the cooking? It's a girl child. Who's most likely to stay up late finishing off the chores? It's a girl child. So those things, if we look down to the lowest denominator, this economy is impacting young women the most. And maybe it's something that we really need to talk about going forward on. How do we then include these young people who are the majority and the most affected? And then we're saying this government has to offer them social amenities. And if this government, which by the last count had an 80%, the salary bill was 80% of the GDP. And 75,000 of those on the wage bill were ghost workers. That means 20% is carrying the burden of paying the salaries of everyone else, because our unemployment statistics are, I think, above 85% now. So if those people are being taxed at 50% of the population, and they carry the burden of the 80%, and this 80%, the majority of them are women who are unemployed, how are we going to balance it out in the future? So if you don't include women and young people in general in the forward-looking economic policies of this country, it will continue to be a minus game. I think that's my general opinion.
Thank you so much, Lucy.
It's quite exciting that form. That leads to when she started debating or whatever you call it, she says she does not understand economics. But I think right now, whatever she's putting across is so eloquent. Now, that's the other thing now. The environment is also creating people to be economically viable. They're conscious of the economics around them. Those bottom lines about economics. So I think that's another positive. In as much as in the middle of the whole this nonsense, she's coming out as a sharpshooter in terms of economics. She understands what she needs to do on a personal level, macro and micro level. So that's another.
Yeah, and I think, so I echo that, and we mustn't value that, because I think that this will be critical. I think we spend a lot of time thinking of the macro issues, and rightly so. At a micro level, most of us will spend time just kind of trying to hold our own, and just trying to survive. And then we think that, and we project that if everything is sorted at the macro level, then everything will be okay. And I think that in a kind of quantitative versus qualitative conversation, we all want to see the economy grow as quickly as possible. We want to see the economy turn around as quickly as possible. I think that we have an opportunity to actually address things at the micro level, each within our sphere of influence, and have the qualitative approach, because I think that is the answer to actually building sustainably. Because when we talk of corruption, at which level is this corruption? We know what's out in the public eye, and where we want to call it out. But actually, it doesn't matter to what level of society it's right there. And actually, I love conversations like this because then we get to grapple with these issues ourselves. I don't know how many policymakers are in the room, and of course our conversation gets to shape it, but actually I think that where each of us gets to play our part in our sphere of influence, we then get to play the long game, and qualitatively we get to address issues at whatever level, from grassroots, we get to address these issues, and I think that way we get to build for the long haul, so that when the things that we want to see shift at a micro level, we start shifting. I think that we will find ourselves further along. So I echo that, and I think that it's calling every single one of us to respond, to grow in our knowledge, to grow in our dialogue with peers and across kind of strata of society. And I think therein lies the answer for us in the long game.
So, as we're moving forward, I'll kindly ask the panelists, and also everyone who's going to contribute to raise your voice so that the people who are watching on our live stream can actually hear you. So, is there anyone from the floor who would like to make any contribution on what our panelists have said so far? Just a contribution, not a question, but a contribution. It's a dialogue. We are meant to engage one another. Can I
add on to what you said about the macro versus the micro? I've always argued that for us Zimbabweans, we are very intellectual reputations, very educated, the most literate in Africa, I think, if not one of the most literate in the world. And we give these very calculated, very statistically correct responses. But it all goes down to bread and butter. I always say that. If, for example, my grandmother in Bundusamu does not have bread and butter, it doesn't matter what Mr. Mbala was saying about foreign direct investment, which is what the business news is always talking about. And I always get lost in that red line that talks about the exchange rate, those FDX what that will be running down there, and I'll be asking myself, what does that matter to me? Because tomorrow I have a bill to pay, I have school fees to pay. How do we boil that down to the ordinary person to understand that, like what she was talking about corruption, at which level do we start to talk about it? Because it affects all of us. All of us here have been corrupted to one point or another. We've exchanged a bribe. But how do I make that count to the macro level? How do I make my grandmother understand that if she takes a political party campaign t-shirt, how does that impact her decision at the end of the day? I think that is where we're losing it, by becoming too intellectual about these issues, and then we end up losing the ordinary person to the issues that really affect them on a day-to-day basis. So when you talk about foreign direct investment, what about the local investor does they talk about what is called the ease of doing business. Is it conducive enough for me to start a business? I've tried businesses several times. I can assure you there's no person in this room who doesn't have an extra business that they are running to make money or to make ends meet. We're all business people here. Whether you're selling airtime, or amaputi, or you're selling clothes, or you're an online person, a dealer, you're a business person. What is making it difficult for you to do it formally? For you to register such that ZIMBA can charge tax on it? Why is it so difficult for locals to do business than it is for people outside? The same question I would ask, why is it cheaper for tourists maybe to come and visit Zimbabwe tourist destinations than it is for me to afford to do it? So the question for me before maybe we look at the investment from abroad, what are we doing industry to make sure that we're exporting instead of importing?
I think a lot of the stuff that you speak to really boils down to the question of, do we understand how economies work? And do we explain it in a way that the next person, in very layman's terms, that if I was to sit with you and say, this is how economies work, it makes sense. And I think part of the suffering that we go through is because people argue on how economies work, and we intellectualize a lot of these arguments, right? And don't get to the business of the day. That what is the why behind an economy? Right? Why do we transact? And it could come from just understanding that the most basic unit in an economy is probably the most powerful of them all, and that's the transaction, right? Because in a transaction, that transaction really is a sentiment that shows human behavior. You know, when you are selling something and I buy it, when I buy it at the price that you offered me, it says I've ascribed a particular value to it and I'm communicating a message to it, right? And when you look at, when we do whatever we do, there's an issue of productivity, right? So if I produce something, I'm producing it for someone else, right? And the reason I'm producing this is I'm trying to then also make a livelihood, right? So generate something that we call purchasing power, that I can then be able to use it to buy goods, services, financial assets, correct? So the equation now becomes, in a transaction, I'm able to make more money the more I produce, correct? So if I produce more, I can earn, right? And I think the question always comes back to how productive are we as a people, right? Because the more productive I am, that means the more I can sell and the more I can earn, right? And what tends to happen is the more we learn, right? So if I'm doing a business, if I'm trying something, if I'm learning a particular skill, the better I get at that skill, the more productive I am, because I may take less time, it may cost me less money, right, to bring that to the market. And the more people I can give that want that product, the better things get, right? And the question now becomes, in this room, how productive are we really? How do we have that mindset, that inventiveness in us? Because this is how the world works. The inventive ones, the ones that actually innovate, are the ones that live well, correct? Yeah. Everyone who's in business and doing business well, that understands that business is about meeting a need. And when I meet that need in a way that people appreciate, I get a return in the form of happier people as well as some financial compensation. And I think it just goes round that circle. Like when you're sitting at home, do you ever ask yourself, how productive am I? Or am I waiting for someone to employ me so that I can get this? So you find this whole conversation of imports, exports, it's a productivity conversation. You import stuff that you don't have, that you can't produce locally because you need it for your business, or you need it it's something that you desire, correct? And you export stuff that you believe you've got a competitive advantage, or you know how to do, but at the end of it all is to earn, right? And you earn a living to take care of your kids, to live large, but different motivations, but it all comes down from a position that it starts with the transaction. And economies are driven on transactions. And one of the things that makes it a bit confusing is the fact that when you look at a transaction, it really speaks to the spending in an economy. My belief is that every economy is driven by spending. Total spending drives an economy. And I say this because one person's spending is another person's income. Can we agree on it? Right? So if one person's spending is another person's income, if my income increases, that means my spending power increases. And what tends to happen? I'm able to buy more. If I'm buying more, I'm increasing everyone else's income. So things keep getting better. But what happens when my income goes down? That means I spend, and there's less income going on. So we get to a point where things get slower and slower, and the prices go down, or things start getting worse, and then we get people intervening, right? And I think the biggest source of confusion for us is credit, debt, right? Because when we engage in a transaction, if I have cash, right, and you're selling something, a transaction, when you give me that product or service and I pay you in cash, the transaction is concluded, right? Simple. Where there's money, it's easy to do business and you know what's what. Where it gets complicated, and I think where a lot of arguments stems is when credit is put into the conversation. Because credit is a promise, I'm going to pay you at a time in the future. So, and you find that credit is what grows at a much volatile than cash. Because if I'm giving you credit, I'm saying sometime in the future I'm going to have to pay this person back. And you're agreeing with me and saying, this guy's promise seems legit. Right? Government is probably the biggest, governments are the biggest credit lenders and the biggest people who borrow, the biggest borrowers in any economy. And that's what shifts things. So the reason is, why are they borrowing? Because it's going to create a cycle in the future where we're going to have to spend less than we earn. And when we don't do that with discipline, that's where things start getting back. So I think it becomes almost a machine. Sorry, we can go back to
just to put up with something else. The other day today, your grandma or your grandpa, there are times when they say they mustn't understand something. It's basically that. Not everyone else is to understand issues. But those that we empower and those that are in authority, they need to make it conducive for people to use the money or whatever it's supposed to do. So it doesn't mean I have to understand economics. I have to feel economics. Like I think this week at an argument was saying, we don't calculate inflation. I feel it on the streets. So when you've got people, I think the biggest challenge that you've got right now is just 3 issues in the country. It's a culture. It's integrity, number 1. Number 2, it's integrity. Number 3, of course, it's integrity. But guess what? You can't teach it in any school under the sun. That's the unfortunate part. Ukulala, you know, the reason why in this particular sort of, can I call it mess? Is that a okay, mess. Okay, the reason why we're in this mess right now because there's no integrity, and integrity is across the board. You don't define government. Government is made up of individuals. So you don't define private sector. Like when you talk about corruption, you discover you guys are more corrupt than government. Because government always cut and paste what the private sector do. You might discover there's so much inequality in terms of the private sector. Probably I'm driving a big car and my employees are driving big cars. It's one of those things. But whenever, and you guys also the little things that you've been doing, that's incremental sums up to the whole thing in terms of corruption. Today you're young, tomorrow you're running government or you're a policymaker. What does that mean? So these are some of the issues that we need to look at and say, the culture, is the culture, our culture, is it conducive enough to take us where we want to be? So that's why I've always say, let's ask them again, the leader to change. Is ways or ways for a better community. That's the bottom line.
Alright. Let's move on to the formalization of currency trading and its effects. What do you think about that?
Right, there we are. We are taking us Patalini from the streets, making them formal.
Many of them women.
Yes. Thank you. They're formalizing everything else. It's got its pros and cons. I'll just probably look at the disadvantages to give other guys to look at advantages. When you bring it up, you're raising everything else effectively. You're raising your liabilities. So everything else now, it's going to be, okay, let's say for argument's sake right now, the rate is 1:3. So everything else that you're buying at 1:1 is now gone up by 3-4. Your prices rise. It goes without saying. So now you need to create. Now already created a thing of demand and supply, but the demand side of things, everyone wants products, but no one is bringing enough with that. So when there's that mismatch now, it's gonna be able now to shoot the prices up and everything. It creates a disharmony in terms of you see your inflation coming up, like what is happening right now. So these are some of the challenges that create in terms of liberalization of but it's a good thing. What normally happens now, when you want to go float, is they call it to float, then to bring the market down, or the forest market to the people, is it really? There are other certain issues that you need to put into place, like internal devaluation. It's not like a piecemeal approach, where currency is involved. And for only information, Zimbabwe's situation is not about currency. So are you going to overprice your goods that you're selling, that the lady is selling by the corner? Just because whether it's in rand or probably it's in US dollars? No, it's a culture thing. How do you price your item? So these are some of the issues that these are some of the disadvantages that you may be. And generally now, it's a formal market that's got limited players to it. You cannot just come into the market. There's also the limitations in terms of like if you're on a travel right now, you're not, as far as is concerned in terms of currency allocation, you're not on the product list. You're just down the road. So what are you going to do at the end of the day? We just go back to the ladies and ask them to do whatever needs to be done. So these are some of the disadvantages. I would just choose to look at the disadvantages so my other colleagues can look probably on the advantage side.
So I would wager to say that Zimbabwe actually has a currency problem from the time we dollarized. If you look at the percentage of labor or what anyone was producing was paid in wages, which would have had to be denominated in US dollars, that actually makes us less competitive to anyone else who's producing the same thing. And that's why Zimbabwe was so expensive, even for tourists at that time. Now, since then, the RTGS came into the system, was flooded into the system, and now you're starting to see anyone who's producing being able to go below 1 cent. Right? It was a problem of having pegged our currency to the US dollar in the first place. And once you do that, for anything that you're producing, your wage cost is denominated in US dollars. If you look at anyone who's producing in Botswana, South Africa, they can go below 1 cent in providing a service in labor, which Zimbabwe couldn't do at the time. So now that we have the RTGS in play, which has been devalued, we can actually go below that. There is an argument to say that can actually stimulate production. So what we had, which comes back to the formalization of forex trading on the markets, we have had the currency problem for a long time. And if you look at any country which has tried to peg against the dollar, if you look at the Mexican peso crisis, went through the same cycle as well, which is what we're going to do now.
So I think I can agree with you on that a big part of some of the problems we're experiencing now are a function of us adopting a US dollar economy, right? Because one of the hardest things for any policymaker to do is to correct a problem in a currency that you don't produce yourself, right? So when you get to a point where you get into a depression, a lot of the measures that you have to you are easier when you're printing your own currency. You get what I'm saying? So what we had is definitely a situation where, because we're using dollars, we were not competitive relative to the market, right? How many of us here would buy our groceries in Botswana or South Africa by showing hands, if you buy groceries? No one. Okay, so I'm the only one, right? Okay, so and why were you doing it? Because it was prices here were too high, right? We were using the currency, all our transaction was based in a US dollar that we didn't produce, and was significantly stronger than the countries around us, right? So that created a headache because it resulted in more people importing it. So that's worsening your balance of payments position, right? Because you're importing more than you're exporting. Makes sense, right? So you find that yes, the currency did play, and you look at it. I'm convinced that where we are now in an inflationary deleverage, especially after the devaluation, because prices are increasing more and more. Because to a big part, a lot of the businesses that operate rely on imports. So some of the high prices that we're beginning to feel now are because we're still importing those things. And now those things which used to be 1:1 are now 1:3.5, 4.5. So that's going to get us on the price, hit us hard in terms of your domestic spending. So we did create a currency nightmare for ourselves because we adopted a currency that wasn't ours, and our exports or economic activity did not grow the foreign currency. You weren't generating foreign currency at a rate that allows us to keep using that currency. And you also weren't attracting foreign direct investment at an okay rate. If you look at when we adopted the US dollar, for a couple of years it seemed as if things were working well because you could go to your ATM, take your money, you could test the system and the system was passing, right? But there came a point where the system, when you went to it, tested it, failed to give you your money, right? And that's why we had a lot of these capital controls we put in where you can't do a certain amount of money. So a big part of this mess has the will itself it's steeped in the currency crisis that we created for ourselves. The inflation we're going through now, it's a currency issue, right? Because none of us really trust the RTGS, but we haven't even really discovered what the real rate is for that currency. So even with the devaluation, which if we had our own currency beforehand, it would have been very stimulative, right? Because if you have your own currency, when you devalue your currency, you devalue it, or you're reducing the price for a person outside your country, right? So outside your country, someone would then say, look, labor is cheaper because where it used to be 1:1, I now have a 60% discount. It's 2.5, correct? So someone coming into the country will find it a lot cheaper because they're using that forex. But the biggest challenge I had with the devaluation was the fact that, one, we had yes in our accounts, but that was US, our accounts had grown primarily based on growth in credit. And then you convert what's in people's account, which is US denominated, right, into RTGS, and then devalue. So you convert it 1:1, then devalue it at 2.5. And the rest of the market responds. So you get it's a mess, right? Devaluation would have worked, I think, had it been a case where we weren't using a foreign currency, where it had been done a bit more strategic.
Okay, just to come in terms of whether it's a currency issue or not. Zimbabwe used to have its own currency, right? What happened?
The printing press.
Yeah. The culture was warped and then we messed up everything else. So even right now, the greater part of from where we're going, this part of the world used to use the rand. Are you still using the rand? No. Why? Because it's a culture thing. So even if right now you guys would use like probably the yen or anything else, you're not going to solve. Are you going out to be able to probably pay good salaries? Are your utilities bill be able to be at a reasonable price? Why did it? Yeah, you see, the reason why industry chose the US dollar was it was good for investment. Because once you're getting return in US dollar, you cannot be able to what? To attract investment because the return is good enough. That's the reason why we didn't go via the round rule. So, the question that I'd like to pose to you without wasting so much time, if I choose the rand right now, will I still be competitive? Would there be less corruption? Will I still respect my neighbor? Will I be able to bring the ladies and the women into the fore, into the mainstream economy? Would there be less nepotism? Would there be less corruption? You see, so in terms of everything else, whatever you do, for as long as there is no integrity, we can't talk in terms of the currency issue. Your problem is between you and me. You are the problem, I am the problem, not the currency. The currency is just like a tool. It's just like someone says, guns are a problem. Guns do not kill people. People kill people. That's as basic as that.
It's not a dialogue.
Thank you so much. My name is Gerald Bantiwa. I'm presenting officer. I think, taking from your previous question, the issue I see in Zimbabwe that we really have to work hard on is that as Zimbabweans we don't have confidence in our economy. So once as Buso was saying, the local investors, I'm one person that believes in local investment more than anything. Once you don't have local investors having confidence in the economy, forget about the FDIs, forget about any bilateral arrangements that you may have with any country or any lending, any financial institution. So unless we build, raise citizens that have confidence in the currency, in the economy. So now we have to somehow build that confidence, because that confidence has been eroded. Number one, because there's been a lot of, since independence, there's been a lot of experimentation around the currency, around the dollar itself, the Zimbabwean dollar, which was at the time probably more powerful than the value was higher than the pound. So why do we have a situation where the the Zimbabwean dollar was now continuing probably less than the pound. It's because the confidence was each day was there. Remember ESA, ZIMPRES, and so forth, all the policies they were experimenting and taking away the confidence of the country, taking away the confidence that citizens have with the economy. So unless also that we don't value the local investors, so there was no value of the local investors. To say, as a start, the local investor was not viewed as a key player or stakeholder. So Zimbabweans were taken as users of the economy, but were not actors in the economy. So unless we become actors in the economy, and we're viewed as users, because now the mantra is that Zimbabwe is open for business, but business for whom? Is it for us, or is it for international investors? So that's my take in terms of issues around confidence, issues around the value of the Zimbabwean dollar, or the value of the economy. Because as long as I don't value the economy, as long as I feel that I cannot invest, it means whatever little investment is there, it will be continuously affected by that lack of confidence and other factors.
So I just wanted to come in and ask you, what's a value? What's confidence? In simple terms, that's culture. It's a way of life. You see, that's where I'm coming from to say I was dismissing the currency issue. Whatever is describing there is a way of life. And that's a culture, which is a mindset. For as long as I don't value the US dollar, I'm going to devalue it as much as possible. For as long as I don't value human rights, property rights, nothing's going to work. That's how it operates. So it's a culture thing, not a currency.
Yeah, I want to add on to what Jerry is saying about the confidence in our local businesses. I noticed that the banks don't trust the ordinary person. They are willing to open a bank account to charge me an administrative fee every month, but they don't trust me enough to give me a loan that I can pay back at whatever time frame. And I've always thought Zimbabwe was the most credit-worthy country, I think, amongst many nations.
The women.
Individuals. The women. I mean, how many of us owe something for the cars we drive? We pay for them cash, and we pay ZIMBA for them. And well, most of us since the roadblocks when we don't have registration cards, we are paid up on our cars. Many of us in the houses that we live, if we're not renting, we own the houses that we live in. Very few people have mortgages. Very few people own anything on the stairs that they are building on. And then those people that have mortgages, they have them with now the cheating property developers who are trusted by the banks. So the bank would rather give a loan to a property developer who will build me a substandard house, and then rather I pay the $300 to the property developer every month than the bank getting that money directly from me and building me a more livable house. The issue you're talking about trust and character, our economic system does not trust us as much as it trusts people from outside. And they would rather borrow government. Government is globe-trotting looking for money. And that money they expect us, the taxpayer, to pay. And we're going to pay it because the Zimbabweans will pay our debts. But it's not fair. I'm not sure what you economists think, but it's about time we stop paying debts that do not benefit us in any way.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, again, this is a crucial conversation, and Brown keeps coming back to culture. And so you spoke of confidence. And again, my mind keeps jumping between the macro and the micro. Because I'm thinking, okay, when you say we don't have confidence, are you saying we don't have confidence like in what? Is it in the whole system as a whole? Because you see, I agree that fundamentally it boils down to culture, which stems from a mindset. The very first question of the argument was, is this environment conducive? And we all sat here thinking yes and no. And to the extent that we're able to identify opportunity, to the extent that we're able to cultivate a problem identification, problem solving mindset and culture, to the extent that I look at you and see that your spending power is my earning power, and to the extent that we see that we all play that part, and actually culture, you know, we're thinking top-down approach a lot. You know, so I think that the opportunity is there. The opportunity is there for us to start to rewire our mindset so that we have a have-a-go attitude, a have-a-go approach to say, okay, well, right where I'm at, you know, we're going to figure things out. Let's apply our minds. How might we, and even at that level, start to reprogram the mindset so that we are identifying problems and solving them. You know, we're talking of local investment. Actually, that is how we build local confidence in one another. And I believe that it's going to grow that way. You know, as opposed to, because I think where we are is that a lot of us, yes, we have our small initiative on the side for the purpose of survival. We have this kind of me mentality. And it's that same mentality that then breeds corruption and etc. But I think that if we blow that open and we are wanting to solve the problems around us and realize that, okay, actually we need one another in order to do that, we then start to change the narrative, we start to rewire the mindset, and we see that confidence starts to develop.
I'll read a statement here, and then I'll ask for your opinions on what you think about the statement. So it reads, the economy is seen to be contracting by as much as 5.2% instead of the previous projected growth of at least 4.2%. This was a statement by IMF. So I'd like to know, what do you think?
It's believable. It's believable and very possible. Because if you look at where we are, there are certain measures that policymakers have when they're faced with situations like we have. Like we in that space where we're deleveraging, our country is not creditworthy and they're trying to access credit. So it almost comes back to the question that you had on why do we not have more and more young people getting access to credit, right? And the traditional systems base your creditworthiness on two things primarily, right? One is your income, and your income shows your ability to repay that debt, right? So if you've got a job and you're earning a steady income, your bank can see, okay, maybe this person can get. So that's why the formally employed like salary-based loans, right? Because they see, okay, there's income coming in and it's coming in regularly, right? So there lies the first problem, right? That maybe the regular stream of income may not be as regular for those who are informally trading, because you probably don't even trust your bank to start with to give them all your money, right? And then the second thing is collateral, which is essentially saying, should you fail to pay or should your income dry up, we've got an asset we can dispose of to recover. So do you see where a lot of us may not fall within a space where we get these facilities, and why some of what you call shady property developers will have it because they've got the collateral in the land, and probably they've set up some form of structure that shows some income coming in. So if a bank is looking at credit worthiness in that narrow mindset, they're going to get access to credit. And therein also explains why contraction may be happening, because if you now as a country, you're trying to approach, where we are now, we're trying to approach all these international organizations to say, hey, can you guys hook us up? Can you hook us up, right? Because we need to fix this economy. They're also looking and saying, do these people generate enough income for income? So let's look at their budget. These guys are in a perpetual budget deficit, so the income is okay. What collateral do these guys really have, right? So what governments, that's where stuff like austerity comes in, right? So we need to cut spending, and they're doing it through this wonderful tax on utilities, where they're now getting that income from us. And that's as a contractionary effect, right? Austerity by its nature is not stimulated, it's contractionary, because it wants to bring down your spending to a level that they believe is manageable. It's usually, I think, from the studies that I've done, I've seen that austerity usually kicks in when you're coming out of what they call a leveraging stage, right? So leveraging is where things are looking good, you're in a boom phase, and you keep borrowing, you keep borrowing, you keep borrowing, and you're reckless with your borrowing. And policymakers come in and say, we're introducing austerity because we need to get this person to start thinking according to their wage, right? So that's supposed to shrink your income. Now, so for Zimbabwe, that's a bit different because you may not feel like you've been overspending or, it's been tough times for a lot of folks, right? But what that does, it contracts, right? And remember what we spoke about a bit earlier? One person's income one person's spending is another person's income. So if austerity is cutting down my income, that means my spending is going to go down. And economies are driven by the spending. So economies are going to shrink. So I agree with the fact that because of that, because spending is going down, we're more likely to go down as well, economy-wise, on a global scale.
I think those are statistics, right? But in reality, you need to get worried. Whenever there's a negative, you need to get worried because what it simply means is you've got no growth. And if you've got no growth, you're bound to die, isn't it? So these are some of the issues that you need to look at and say to yourself, are we honest enough that we need to do that? So the biggest challenge right now is buying power. What you call buying power, your ability to be able to spend. Once I take it away from you, the economy is going to shrink. And now if you're going to have 2 quarters shrinking recession, and that's what you don't need right now as you speak. The unfortunate part is like even if you try to raise your salaries now, the manufacturers, unfortunately, they're not here. They'll be able to raise their own, the retail prices, the retail prices. So it's a chicken main kind of scenario. So it's a bit difficult to where you're standing from. So, ladies and gentlemen, sorry to break the news to you. You have to get worried going forward when the figures are negative. Mark my words.
So what are we going to do?
Good job. Good job.
When the government then formalized the exchange rate, they made it to 2.5, right? And in my bank account, they said $500, which before the announcement was 1:1. Yes, was it not fair for them to then say times it by 2.5 to make it balance to what it is now? Because I feel like I was cheated in some way. Am I wrong? I'm feeling that way.
Why you want to?
I need to
do you want the incredible outcome? Because we thought cheated as well. Is that like a second round question?
Just
no, I think I might say this is how the government did it. They assumed that your $500 that's in your bank, they can't confirm where you got it from. So here's the assumption. I'll assume you took your $100 US, went it on the street, and now you've got $500 in the bank. So for us to then say 1:1, it's a chance that you were waiting for us to then say we are floating the rate, and then when we do it, we are going to multiply it by 2.5, and then that money, that funny money that everyone created in their funny culture of earning, we are now floating money that we never had.
Okay, let's say we need dinner.
So let me come to you on that one, right? So I think those guys. So this is where it is, right? That I think it comes down. I felt cheated, right? Because from where I sit, I know that I either earn, like when I do my transaction, I'm either using money, which is the hard currency, right? That I can give to someone, or it comes from credit growth, right? So if you look at the statistics, you'll find that when we started using US dollars, there was a progressive increase in the number of treasury bills that were being issued. So treasury bills was a way of the government getting funding so that they can use it to spend on goods and services to stimulate the economy, right? If you remember, some years back, there was the request from banks to lower their interest rates. The reason why, and that's monetary policy, right? When you lower interest rate, it makes it cheaper to borrow, and you expect more and more people to borrow, and as more people borrow, that's more economic activity, right? You're assuming that business is going to do a bit more with it, and if businesses do well, they can employ more people, there's more goods and services, things increase salaries like what some people experienced post-dollarization, right? But what's driving it? Remember they've created these promises to repay to banks through these treasury bills. And these promises to repay were in US dollars, right? this thing that they then turn around and say, we're US dollar denominated debt. And the problem with that was we were now issuing debt in a currency we don't produce. And it was bound to blow up because with debt there comes a time where you need to pay the piper. And they couldn't pay the piper. So they changed what the piper got, okay, to RTGS. So you do feel cheated because I would have said, look, if I was earning it before, when you opened your account, they say it's an RTGS account.
No.
What did they cost?
Right?
How many of us deposit US dollars in those accounts? Right? And you go and take your US dollars, the days were bad, and you would go and take your US dollars and get it out until the election, right? So the way this thing is, if for emerging economies that are heavily reliant on foreign denominated inflows, the biggest challenge with those is stuff hits the fan the moment a shock happens, right? And for us, a shock would have been the election result that came that was unexpected. Because I was working in an investment bank, just an election, it wasn't like trade did this or that, just an election outcome that wasn't satisfactory to certain people. Got a lot of people taking the money out and selling it out. And unfortunately, at that point in time, we had removed exchange control, so people were able to move their funds freely. And as those US dollars left people's accounts, it meant banks, fewer and fewer banks were able to meet their obligations when you came to your bank.
So if we lived in a proper country,
which we do.
That had proper checks and balances and rule of law, would I be able to sue the government to say, where's my money? If I could prove, for example, that my account only got money from my salary, I wasn't trading in anything sinister, and that money came from one account to another account if it was in US dollars.
I think you don't even need to live in a proper country to sue. The question is, will it help? And how long are you willing to play the game? So
just to come in terms of that, what happened now prior to that, if your account was literally going against dollars today, you need to go to your bank and they separate in terms of your deposits and everything else. So you can still be able to recover your money. That's not the station instrument, that's fine. Then the money that you get in terms of the 1:1 or the other, there's what we call a mass loss that can be done in terms of. But now it depends. That's why you discover prior to liberalization of the exchange rate, there had to be a law that has to be passed prior to them trading. So you discover everything knows the technicality in terms of the law. I think when I was doing my presentation the other day, I'm like, no, the law has been covered, so there's nothing that you can do. But you can take your bank to task to say, when I got my money, it was USD, and I managed to take these USDs and everything else. The unfortunate part of policy, it affects everybody else. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to be a favorite tonight, or is it today? When you've got your $500 already in terms of your pricing, in terms of everything else, you already took them off for crying out loud. So what the government did, no, your prices already were based on that. As everyone knows that I was doing it, for everyone that you're selling, you're based on what? On the power market rate. Yeah. So already,
but not all businesses.
Sorry, I'm saying.
That's like financial services. I can wake up and say my interest is not too much.
Okay, one thing. The products and services were already at that level. Yeah, they already, no, that's another culture thing that you're saying. Was business good enough? You see, there's nothing like bad money, good money. They're just bad people. That's what it's So just to finish up, what I'm trying to say now, already you're trading in that level, the 2.5. So already your amount of money that was in there just give value. We can't question that. So government just came in and said, I'm officializing what you're doing already.
No, Mr. Brown, it wasn't officialized in every sense. Maybe in the supermarket, I could still pay my bill, my DCC using EcoCash. I could still pay my Edgar's using EcoCash at the same rate. So to me, it was just your food stuffs. But the other, your school fees were still relatively at that amount until January when, like you said, shit hit the fan. Okay, that's what you are thinking.
No. Let's take a hand from
I was just going to contribute to your question about whatever balance you have in your account. What is it? What was it? There was a point when government issued treasury bonds to banks in order to meet government payroll.
Yeah.
For one, you say 80% of it. 80% of our GDP goes to
salaries.
Yes, the government wages, right? Precisely. What they did was use what reportedly they had a loan with $100 million loan. They could leverage it 10 times and borrow from 10 people using the same $100 million, which is essentially what they did. And it got to a point where what you were earning was no longer US dollars, but it became, some of it was money that was coming in from the system they created to meet the government payroll. So for a citizen who's also partly responsible for the functioning of the country, it's difficult for me to go to them and say that I can trace this dollar amount that's in my account to the US dollar amount where it originated from, unless you're exporting.
Yeah.
Hello everyone. Like, we are here discussing all this actually, using these big fancy words and stuff. But in Japan, one, there is an instrument by the government which says that if you invest your money in Zimbabwe, they can take your money over whatever you're putting it in time. There have been number documents which have been sealed by the government which will tell you the government cut this, the government cut this, the government cut this. So at the end of the day, you are talking about investor confidence. Who in their right mind is going to come into Zimbabwe and invest in such an economy? One, the only people who can come maybe in Zimbabwe are the Russians and the Chinese who will come and grab maybe the land, everything. Like for instance, Zambia, they've taken their airport. Zimbabwe, they're taking a diamonds and stuff. So at the end of the day, it's not about maybe who are said to be writers of the greatest papers, ideas, in, maybe in the whole world in Zimbabwe. But implementation, managers and stuff, you can sit here and talk big words, but even if the leadership of Zimbabwe is not taken out, ZANU-PF is not taken out. If ZANU-PF is taken out and capable people who can be put into leadership are given the proper jobs, everything is going to go okay in Zimbabwe. That's what it's not like that's what I believe. That's what is supposed to happen.
Okay, I think I hear you, and I understand where it's coming from. People are biggest problem is to expect a political solution to our problem. To say this party will move this party and put this party is going to work, no. Like many people have been saying here, we have to solve it in our attitude and the way we approach these systems. It's a system problem, and the attitude is the way in which we approach the system.
How can you solve that?
So I think, look, this is, you can't be frustrated. If the leader is not making, if anyone in a position is not making decisions, the benefits you can be tempted to blame them and be associated with. But what you find whenever you're faced with these economic problems, it's really like it's been echoing. It's a culture, right? Because even economics in itself, the very bare bones or the basic instrument in economics is based on human behavior. It's how we behave, right? So our behavior is one of the things that we need to check ourselves. So that's something that we can affect, that we begin to change as individuals. And that's sort of cascades. Because if you look at it in economies, it's a summation of all the transactions. So it's a summation of people's individual behaviors. And where we find at times, before we even look at what economic policy documents put there, the questions that go through my mind, and I think that are usually key to answer is, do we believe that the policymakers know what needs to be done? And if they know what needs to be done, will they be given the power to do what needs to be done, right? Because I think there's been a lot of talk of what Zimbabwe needs to do, but there hasn't been a lot of action on those particular plans. And that just sort of comes from raw power and authority, right, of those individuals. But I just want to come back to your question that I think we should be careful not, because I'm very picky on this, the whole thing that these want US dollars, right? Because if you look at even economies by themselves, I did a check and I realized that in America itself, where they use US dollars, the money, hard currency in circulation is about 3.5 trillion. But how much debt is involved? Right? So you find that debt is, and when these shocks happen, it's debt that causes these pain points. Because the moment someone doesn't pay a debt, you either drop into a recession or you drop into these depressions, depending on where you are in your cycle. So we should be very careful when we agree to like, oh, these weren't US dollars. They were US denominated transactions. And what we did there was just we showed recklessness in how we used them. We were using, it's like bad credit, right? And bad credit is where you spend it on overconsumption that doesn't generate any income. Had they taken these treasury bills and was invested in infrastructure that would attracted more investment, we would have all been happy because it would have kept a steady flow of income in the economy, and we probably would still be using US dollars now.
Yeah, I get that, but I think the way to resolve this now is not to say, I put in US dollars, I'm getting US dollars. It's to say, okay, after a certain amount of time, you can pay me back what you took, because banks don't just put your money in the vault.
Yeah.
If you invest your money with whatever financial institution you bank with, they're going to invest it in some other enterprise, which can be financing the building of a skyscraper, building, or some such other activities, which makes it hard for you to make a bank run on the bank and say what I had in here was US dollars.
I agree with you, man. That it's exceptionally difficult for an individual, for me to come and start saying, trace this and this is your, it's going to be a nightmare unless you export. And that is probably going to be easier for them to sort of, in the KYC, to say, okay, this is your money. But this is where we are. This is the money, we've got RTGS, and it is what it is. How do you move?
Okay, I think the problem is the rule of law. We can't run away from politics like the other gentleman said. I will pose one question to you to say, if you borrow me money, what's going to make me pay it back? Is there anything that says pay back? There's nothing in Zimbabwe. Same thing, if you deposit your money into a bank, what mandate do they have to give you back your money? What makes them say we need to give this depositor back their money? There's nothing. As long as there's no rule of law, nothing will work. That's why you realize that people will borrow money from banks, from government, they don't pay it back. Nothing will be done to them. So we don't have that fear to say, because money has rules. When it comes to money, there should be rules. And when there's no rule of law, those rules for money don't apply. So even investors can't come into a country where there's no rule of law. Because I put my money, we sign documents, everything. But those documents are worth nothing if there's no rule of law.
I'd like to differ. You'll find probably Ethiopia is one of the poorest countries. You find Syria right now, they are bombing each other, but there's business that's going on there. And there's trade that's going on. Well, rule of law, I think, is relative. That's why it is. In the Zimbabwe context, I think we have to admit that we have to put it in a relative sense. Because one thing that you look at and find that we still have got lawyers that are still pumping and they're pushing and they're going and they're getting their debts back. They're getting their monies back, right? And then at the end of the day, my brother, you're saying they built the DPC, Deposit Protection Commission. I put my money in the bank. If the bank falls, I get my money back. Okay. I've got a brother who I think a few months ago, he got money from Kingdom that folded, I think, over 2 years ago.
Okay, I agree with you, but we're not talking about money.
Yeah,
we're talking about economy. We're talking about an individual situation that happened in Harare, in Bulawayo. We're saying how many people put money in Time Bank, how many people put money in Kingdom, how many people got their money back.
I've already given you an example, right, that people are getting their money back, right? There are some banks that folded before the DPC was there. And unfortunately, the government couldn't then say, we're going to give you back your money, right? But now the government has got a mandate to do that. That's one. And number two, as much as we may say money is money, that we've got an economy that is run on the informal sector. When me and you are able to trade, whether we are already removing some areas that government is supposed to be moving at. Right, we've got a 95% sector where me and you can trade, we exchange, we can even credit rate each other and reach a point where we're doing business. But then our government then now has got a challenge because one, it couldn't tax that area, and then number two, it couldn't regulate it. It's always a beauty to trade in an area where there's no regulation. But regulation won't last long. And now, slowly but surely, we're now being regulated, and we're now saying, okay, government has got a problem. Government has done this. Like, I'll give you an example. The parallel market was already functioning, but it was killing the economy in terms of how it was now. It's free flow, and it's got lots of arbitrage. Now we've got an interbank system where now the government is saying, okay, you guys, you can now formalize and get into the system where all of us can benefit. And then everyone is now complaining, no, we are happy that you did your interbank thing, but you didn't tell us what happened.
So Denzel, sorry to cut you off, but I think a lot of, if you look at it, a lot of this comes from trust. Like you just don't walk up and say, because you've got a great idea, I need to trust that you're going to be able to follow it. So in the absence of trust, look, the very interbank that you're talking about hardly trades, right? So it's just it's one of those things where you ask yourself, so if we were to ask ourselves, the introduction of the interbank, was that a good decision? Yes or no? But what would have been required for it to function well? And one of the things is, it was almost like introducing the RTGS is introducing a new currency, correct? And whenever you're introducing a new currency, hold on, you can argue with that later, right? But you're essentially saying, if I was using the US dollar, now I'm now using something else that's totally different, that you now trade, right? Okay? What would have worked or would have helped is, whenever you introduce a new currency, you need some hard backing so that you can support that particular introduction. As things stand, the interbank doesn't do much because they don't have enough to really support that market. Am I making sense? And if the market worked, if it could work for a couple of months, give it a year, you get to a point where someone would then say, maybe I'm not too keen on going on the black market since this is working. Do you get what I'm saying? You get more and more corporates as long as I know that, look, I can go to my bank, I get the rate of the day, we transact, I change my RTGS, we productive, right?
But you can't then control the invisible hand.
I'm not controlling the invisible hand.
Yeah, but
what you facilitate a market where it actually, because waking up and saying, here's a supermarket that no one wants to go and buy and it doesn't make things better, right? And that's what they need to do. You have to create an environment where we want to use your tools, that we trust these tools will work. Just the same way he's mentioning that if people feel as if I can get a debt and not pay it, that's because a culture has been brought in where we believe that I can take a debt and not bother to pay it, right? And the very deposit protection corporation that you mentioned will not give me 1:1 on the dollar. I may get 10 cents for every dollar I lose. So it's not like a foolproof solution, right?
Sorry, actually it's $500 with bill pay.
Total.
That's the max you can get. It's meant for small deposit. The other guys follow the normal channel.
And I said,
Sorry, go ahead.
so I want to say, I want to talk about the issue of currency. If you look at the SI on the RTGS, it says 1:1. However, if you want foreign currency, it's willing buyer within the same. So it means that the government is still playing along the issues of 1:1. So you go and check it, it actually says 1:1. However, but you can only get foreign currency at a willing buyer willing sale, at a rate determined by the person who is willing to buy, willing to sell. So which is why I had a problem with the government pegging it at 2.5. What was the basis of pegging at 2.5? Because the rate should be determined by the markets. To say, if we start at 1:1, the equal level, let the demand and supply determine the rate that will stabilize the market. And that's the rate that will. That's why there is when you look at the foreign exchange markets, the rates are not always at the same level. They are always, except if the country then issues maybe an SI instrument to say we are devaluing our currency for the following purposes, like China, you find China, Japan, they always devalue because they want maybe to attract certain foreign investments.
Alright, so as this is the last segment for this discussion, we want to map a way forward and we want to make it in line with the transitional stabilization program. So how can we do that?
Just to begin with, all economic problems are mathematical. Any economic problem is 7% political, it's 30% fundamental. So you need to balance the two. How to balance your fundamentals. I hate you, the Tory fundamentals, everything else is. It's like Moses was handed down 10 commandments. It's the same thing in terms of economics. There are certain rules that you need to follow, certain rules and regulations that you need to follow. I think when my former boss came in, he was trying to do what needs to be done. First of all, on the fundamentals, we're trying to address that. First of all, the political will probably wasn't there, if we're going to be frank there. So that's the reason why I'm saying in terms of economic problems, it's always 30% political, it's always 30% that. Some of the issues that we're trying to do, like even your rate, what's that? The 2%. Of which, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, you're supposed to pay that because you haven't been paying taxes as the youth. So it's a good thing because youth haven't been paying taxes, and taxes are, your hairstyle, your clothes, right now, it's about your taxes. So that was a good move in that particular thing. But what it was used for became another issue. So fundamental, it was okay. Political, probably it wasn't the best thing to do. So these are some of the issues that you need to look at and say, what are you trying to do? Then the other issue is trying to stimulate growth. Your production. But how do you produce when probably everything else it's not cost effective? So we're going to produce for. So even for the local market, you're going to have like an arbitrage where importer, you need to import green goods that are very competitive against the local market. So these are some challenges that we're looking at and say, how do we now come into the whole thing? But you need to speak to the people, exactly. You need to introduce policies that speak to the ordinary person on the streets, so that they can have a buy-in, the buy-in. The unfortunate part in terms of policy right now, the guys that have good ideas do not have the power to implement. Like the other gentleman was saying there, in terms of your policy document, here's a guy from Wange, Mr. Brown, produces a brilliant document, doesn't have power. He gives it to a guy, possibly Denzel, who is in Harare. He tries to implement it. Guess what? Down the road, does he have the know-how? Does he have the cream de la cream? Does he have the bounds to do it? No ways. So what does it do? It will fizzle out. So now you've got a conflict now. He who is producing the document is not the implementer. So people are stealing ideas trying to implement. It doesn't work. So I think you run shows in terms of innovation, which is what we're trying to do. If you discover TSP was also looking at the youth, you say, be as crazy as you can be in terms of what? Your ideas, so that you can be able to create employment, create development. I've got some players here that are into that, so I mean, Cherry is into that, B is into that, to try to create that gap, because there's little production. So that's a challenge to you to say, these are some of the issues that people need to come in and be able to bridge in the gap. You discover some of the issues that are being brought in there, just try to be as inclusive as possible. But now, is the political will there in terms of that equation that I put across? We're fundamental. So if you're trying to address the fundamentals and it's not in tandem with the politics, there's going to be an issue. If you try to address the politics and it's not in tandem with politics, there's going to be discord. So these are some of the things that we need to be able to balance in terms of that equation and say, how do we move forward? What's the way? And do you have original ideas that can make a difference in terms of whatever needs to be done? So it's a challenge to everyone else. There are certain policies in terms of what she was talking about. There's need for advocacy. You advocate whichever way it is, whether it's political or whether it's financial or whether it's youth or it's women, you advocate for that, what can I say, deliberate approach to things. Whether it's women, you need women to be inclusive, you need to bring them in. Whether it's ease of doing business, you lobby as your various organizations, so that whether it's the youth that you access funds, as long as the youth pay back, that's what you need to look at. So this is now going forward parties like, but the biggest challenge of them all is to go home, look into the mirror, ask that man in the mirror, change his ways for a better community. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. So I would say, so we're talking about the way forward. Certainly on the ground, I think that it's incumbent on us to create spaces that are as conducive as possible. Granted, we're all agreed that this environment is hostile. This environment is not friendly to anyone. I agree, 70% political. Where it is in our power, we ought to keep knocking on doors because we can't just sit back. But it is really necessary for us to create those spaces, both physical and virtual, but those spaces that are going to start to encourage a shift in the culture. a shift in the thinking towards critical thinking. Spaces that are going to encourage the emergence of new ideas. When we talk about reindustrialization, what are we talking about? Are we talking about industry as we knew it? Some of us knew industry back in the 90s, back in the 80s. Is that what we're talking about? How are we able to redefine that? The mayor sat here maybe a week or two ago talking about inclusive cities. I mean, this conversation needs to happen, and we need to figure out what does that mean for us right here in this environment. What does that mean? How do we fan that to flame? How do we start to encourage new ideas, to say, yes, I know that we've been in survival mode for so long. Okay, it's now time to shift gears. It's now time to change our thinking. What problems that exist around us are we able to start to rally ourselves together to start addressing those problems? How might we start to generate some sort of revenue from that? How do we set up young people? What does that mean for the women in our communities? Do you know what I mean? So I think that on the ground there is a lot that we can actually do. And if we all take on that attitude to say, okay, I need to put my hand to the ground, I need you just as much as you need me. Together we figure this thing out. On the politics, those that have the direct influence must keep knocking on those doors. If it takes us 10, 20 years, we're better off starting now as opposed to sitting back. But conversations like this, I believe that in the long term are going to have an influence on policy as well.
I like the direction you're taking, and I'm also quite passionate about the issues you're speaking on. Way forward, especially what does this exactly mean for our generation? I'm strategically positioned for the fourth industrial revolution, how to relate to it as young people. Because unpacking issues of the economy on their own and isolating the practicality of these brilliant ideas and these models that we see in research papers from global institutions such as Dow and Matabene, people throw around statistics from IMF. What does it mean for the context of Zimbabwe? I know in the room there are young people who have started businesses. Perhaps someone has a business where they do sockets. They make this at home, they sell them. I want to understand from your idea, how do we break down all this jargon, especially in a context such as Zimbabwe's? People are running very simple businesses. Day-to-day, like the example I'm giving you, someone makes soap detergents, they live on that. As we are right now, outside there's a very vibrant vegetable market.
Yes.
How do they fit into this big idea of inclusive cities? Are we really in touch with those realities and where the world is going? And can we also take all those models that we see globally and apply them into a Bulawayo situation, if I may put it?
Yeah, so I think the short answer is yes, we can. But we just, I think that if we are being aware of our environment and our context, and if we are owning our, so some of the things that we're coming up to local investment, building trust, I think we need to be aware of our own context. There's so much to learn from the first world and what the first world is doing. In many ways, we are miles behind. But yes, if we need to walk out onto that street, if we picked 5 people from this room and said, go walk up and down Fifth Avenue for the next 3 hours, pen and paper, you come back here, you whiteboard it, come up with some problem statements. How might we kind of statements? I think just even in that space of time, you'll be amazed what comes up. We are now saying, okay, our context, our developmental issues, our homegrown solutions, owned by us in our way. Do you know what I'm saying? When FBI now comes into play, guys are finding us on the move, having unlocked some new ideas on how we might do business, how we might address the issues in our communities. Do you know what I mean? So yes, there's so much to learn, and there's collaboration across the board. We need international collaboration.
This is a follow-up maybe to that.
Yeah, sure.
This is a follow-up to that. Our leaders really in touch with where exactly they're supposed to be? Do they really understand?
I think you're noticing that I respect the macro issues, but I keep wanting to come back to the micro. Because here we are in this room. If I say hands up, anyone who's got a business idea, there's not a single hand that's going to remain down. Do you know what I'm saying? We can get caught up in all these political conversations and etc. But I think that the potential that each of us holds in our hands is massive. I mean, Terry was just reminding me of the conversation I had with Brown maybe just two weeks ago, in terms of, I'm passionate to see in this city, and Terry and I are a part of a team that's working towards this. We're passionate to see this city developing its own ecosystem that makes entrepreneurship as easy as possible. An ecosystem that sets entrepreneurs up. Denzel sitting there shaking his head. That sets entrepreneurs up. So I didn't say easy, I said as easy as is possible. That sets entrepreneurs up for success. So in other words, what that says, it says, okay, pitch night that's happening on the 26th. In the come on. I can see Gibson there with his hand up. International coming alongside Scholastica next week, running conversations on the ground. Okay, now we need to these players, yourselves, Nikki, in an entrepreneur's journey towards success. How do you map it out? Our silos. In the name of your inclusive city, this is what we see. Here's the role that we play over here to get an entrepreneur from here. Journey from here to there. Terry's going to get them from there to there. Brown is going to get. If they're a woman, they take this kind of track because they, this empowered bank. Their program for women and etc. Do you know what I'm saying? But it needs us all now. Okay, we all have a part to play.
I think the way you want to look at entrepreneurship is like telling a story. You're telling a story. Like I've always written, MBAs don't run companies, models don't run companies. As far as Bulawayo is concerned, I'm just going to narrate Bulawayo. It's a unique, special solution finding path. You learn from all the other models across the world, but you come here and be practical in terms of how you implement it. It's like you're honest to yourself. When you're telling a story, you need to tell it well. So now, how do you tell a story and then monetize it? That's why you need all these players. You've got him, you've got myself, you've got everything, you've got your soul saying, telling a story that brings out a complete brand product so that it goes where it's supposed to be. I mean, let's look at whatever they've been done like across in America, the Silicon Valley. There have been losses, there have been misses, there have been hits. But that's what you need to do. And the other issue, what can I say? It's not going to happen overnight. I think that's one thing we need to appreciate. It's not going to happen overnight. Short-term pain for long-term gain, or whichever way you're supposed to put it across in terms of that rhetoric, that needs to be done. But you definitely need to aim for stars and stripes. You need to work it out, roll your sleeves, get there and do what needs to be done. And you need to learn. You can't discount the part of learning. Like I say, business is like the Bible. You need your 10 commandments. Once you miss those commandments, you go astray, and definitely the wages of sin are death.
Okay, I would like to probably start from the problem. So So I agree with him in terms of us fixing the culture. But then it's whose culture that needs to be fixed. Because at times, in terms of individual culture, yes, we corrupt, we do all sorts of things, change money in the streets, but simply because there is a window that allows us to change money. If you close that window, no one is going there. So that's probably maybe some kind of survival. Then the one who needs to have good faith culture is probably the policymakers. And the solution to that is what he was talking about in terms of advocacy and engaging them. Because as long as there is a window, we're going to look at how to survive within that environment. Because if there's no one to buy my US dollars at a rate, I'm not going to sell them. But if there's an opportunity that you can sell your US dollars and someone will buy them, then you can't control people that way. So it's not really our culture that we need to fix in terms of that. And then we move on to how we solve the problem. In terms of individual, how do we solve our problems? We need to think business. We need to stop thinking government will solve our problems. We need to start coming up with solutions to our own problems. If we're going to try and solve the macroeconomic environment of Zimbabwe, or rather contribute to the development of Zimbabwe, we need to start thinking about production and replacing those things that we're importing by things that we produce at a cheaper value. If you're still complaining that production in Zimbabwe is more expensive, it simply means you haven't found the solution to produce at a cheaper rate. So you need to keep on thinking and start producing at cheaper production cost so that you can still make a profit and solve a problem. That's how we can solve the macroeconomic environment of our country. So I think the conversation that we are having is in the right direction. And we need to think individually and even as groups, as institutions, how to solve the macroeconomic problems that we have as a country. And the only solution is production so that we can stop importing and start exporting. Thank you.
Okay. I think.
Thank you very much. I've been bending my hand. I think I'll contribute politically because I've invested all my life in politics. I want to agree with all those who are saying politics and economics. We cannot divorce the two. Simply because we have a country that canonizes, sanctifies politicians and thieves. We have politicians that have been elected into power. And this is where it all begins. They're gambling ideas in government, and whatever they're doing, it then channels down to what we are suffering today. So then my contribution as going forward, in as much as we are trying to entrepreneurs, etc., coming up with consultation programs that are drip feeding to the government at the end of the day. And I love the point that he raised to say, which culture are we feeding into? It all goes back to the central government. We have seen corruption of magnitudes. Even the devil doesn't steal the way our politicians steal. So we are seriously affected by the level of corruption that we are seeing in most institutions. And this then affects everyone. So my point is we cannot then divorce politics and economics. So moving forward, stabilization program that we have in the country, can we please have our political leaders be baptized away from corruption, if I'm to say it, because it's a syndrome, then we need hygiene in our politics. Let me say that. That's number one. Number two, I think consultation, grassroots support, investment. We're talking about investment, and I feel we lack consultation. Our policies, etc., interest, ESAP, as far as even the ZIM asset, all these are good policies that the government has always produced time and again. But I always say to people, the best education in Zimbabwe is failed to solve our problems. We have professors, doctors, but they've failed to solve our problems. So some of these things will not be, we're very good in coming up with programs, like what my sister was saying about intellectual property and so forth. But we have failed to solve these things. I think we need to go back to basics. So consultation, plus people on the ground know what they need. And whenever you're crafting the policies, these people, when we engage them on the ground, they will feed important and effective systems. Lastly, my question to Mr. Brown, to say, Maurice Palliser, say the issue of DDI versus FDI, domestic direct investment, it's very important and paramount. We need foreign direct investment once they see that the people on the ground are doing something. So you have been giving loans and etc. to the people. I'm not sure how then, moving forward, are there any
ways that you can motivate people to come and get those things. Because without DDI, or probably you investing into us as youths or as entrepreneurs, it's going to be difficult for us to get the FDI that we need. And as much as not about it. Then lastly, political as well. There's this bubble of sanctions. I don't know, I'm sorry, but I just have to mention the bubble of sanctions. It's very critical moving forward. We are chopped, we are smoked, we are in a mask, and we will always shout about sanctions, sanctions, and more sanctions. If we can at least get that out of the way, I'm sure we can start saying something. Thank you.
Okay, I see in hand.
Okay, on this sanctions issue, you said there wasn't one on the sanctions issue, like, I love the way people love posting what used to happen in Rhodesia, Rhodesia that. How did they survive? Because they were also under sanctions. It's a question I always I'd love one person to answer, because they somehow survived. So the way people, every time when someone gets stuck, they're like, we're under sanctions. So how did Rhodesia survive?
So, you don't mind me I think a lot of what the guys have been speaking to really speak to what keeps an economy going. I think the more we invest in terms of growing our productivity as a country, if you focus, get your hands dirty, become more inventive in solving and providing what people need, you will survive. I think that's the long and short of it. The complaint we have on these documents is that the documents seldom get implemented as you don't get to see the results. So you find the more we're doing this, the more we discover the entrepreneur's journey and what needs to be done and what areas work and don't work, the more we discover the markets that are available for us, both domestically and internationally. You get to a point, if your business solves a problem, you are going to get the customers and it's going to have a positive impact in your economy. The environment may be difficult, you may be regulated a lot, but the more productive we are. You see the conversation around saying, how do we make entrepreneurship the thing? Because the beautiful thing about this craze behind entrepreneurship is that it's productive. It's going to get you jobs, right? It's going to produce goods and services that people need, right? And the very good ones are runaway successes, and they change economies drastically. That they can dull the effect of things like sanctions or corruption to a degree. Because some of these countries that we look up and say, these guys have got it right, they battle with the same things, right? They battle with corruption, right? They battle with poor service delivery, the same things that we go through. But what they've done is they've managed to push through and have something that sort of overshadows these are the negatives. So it seems as if they're not as bad, because they've understood the one thing. At the end of the day, any economy, productivity growth is what's going to be important in the long run. Talk about everything else, but if you're not productive, we're doing nothing.
I always have one hand. Because now I have to. Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. Since we started was listening, we talked about is the environment good for investment or not. So far, I can say from a layman's point of view, the environment is not good for investment, but from an entrepreneur's point of view, the environment is good. Because when there is a problem or when there is a need, there is always an opportunity for someone to invest and do something. But even though when you try to invest as an entrepreneur, you might face some other factors like maybe funding and the likes and the likes. And then later we talked about TSP, what's the way forward. And now we've got this new program which is TSP, and previously we had ZIMBAMBWE, and before ZIMBAMBWE we had other many programs. So what I can say is that everything rises and falls on leadership. If leaders can put their house in order and do what is right at the right time, you will realize that all these other things like sanctions, we are not going to be talking about such things. We are not going to be talking about illegal forex dealers when the leaders are doing things right. Because everything rises and falls on leadership. And for example, sometimes I'm a citizen here in Zimbabwe, but sometimes I do feel much pain when we buy electricity from outside the country. We import everything. We import even what they are going to import bread from other countries. We import just anything from other countries. If the leaders can put their house in order, just try to deal with the industries, the key things. For example, there is a lot of externalization of foreign talents. Like we take a lot of money going to external hospital to get medicated, to be treated outside the country. We take a lot of money going there. And then we take a lot of money buying electricity, we take a lot of money doing this and doing that. Why can't we just focus and maybe just come up with the best one hospital in our country so that our funds circulate in our country? Why can't we deal with our water and maybe improve dams and have enough water and also in all these other sectors of economic development? And then we're going to, I think, do well as a country. Otherwise, if we don't deal with these things, starting with our leaders, we are going to have many of these business programs like this one. It's useful, but if we don't put our house in order, all these programs will not do anything. It will be just a waste of time.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you so much to our panelists. I'm sure every young person who was listening and was listening really gained something. And I'll call our MC.
Thank you very much, people, for creating time to come and discuss with this issue. And there is one thing that I always like about Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is like reading a lot. Zimbabwe is like spending so much time on the internet. Zimbabwe is like bringing about ideas. But when it comes to action, we are always found one thing. And it is my hope that us as the young people of this nation should take this initiative very seriously. Not just to come and discuss them, but be part of the action plan, be part of the key players in bringing about change. I thank you very much for coming, and this time I also want to call our curator, Nicole. By the way, the curator in the Global Shepherds community is more or less like a president, so to speak. So I would like to call her to come and give a few remarks before we close. Thank you.
Right, thank you. That's fine. Thank you so much to everyone for coming. I caught feelings. It hurts me to hear a young person say dialogue sessions are useless. How then do we learn as much? Who learned something new today? Something they totally didn't know. Who was enlightened and got an idea of something? Who was inspired by someone on the panel? If you're inspired, raise your hand. But how do we get all that inspiration and all that knowledge and all that impact if you do not use it now like this? So to my brother, these will continue. As global shapers, economic dialogues is set to continue, and we're here to have more such sessions.
I will attend more.
It's important. Thank you so much. You see, it's important that as young people, we constantly come together and shape our understanding of critical issues. So when we select a panel of this criteria, we're looking for people who are local, with an appreciation of the economy, who are players also in the economy. And so I'm grateful to our panelists because we know they're very busy people. Wusi was taken from a very busy schedule in her office. We usually hijacked her. Mr. Ndewe, I don't even want to talk. We heard of how heavy and hectic the schedule is on your end. Running this organization is that hard. Terence Mugova, we know you're probably preparing each night and you're working so hard at educate. Mr. Morris Mbala, I'm sure there's a long queue in your office of people waiting.
Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown. Thank you, sorry for that. Thank you for the correction. There's probably a long queue of people waiting in his office, but we appreciate the fact that they took time to come to us young people, shape our understanding of issues, shape our knowledge, inspire us, and teach us something new. So on that, please let's give them a very loud. Going forward, I think in future, because I realize each of you is packed, you have your own strength and from your expertise, the work you're doing. In future, we have what they call Meet the Leader sessions. So for instance, when we call Busi to come and speak to young people on an issue she specializes in. Today we just generalized and wanted, a diverse approach to the issue of the economy of Zim. But in future we have Meet the Leader sessions where we say a one-on-one with one of them, so that they also teach us and share with us secrets to success, secrets on how, something new we can always learn from them. So Meet the Leader sessions are something we intend to do as global shapers. So I know most of you in the room have applied to be shapers, and your applications have not been accepted at some point, or you came for interviews and your interview was not successful, or you've tried to send emails and Facebook messages, your messages are either responded to or there's an automatic response. It's important that you come and firstly maybe have an understanding of what we do as global shapers. I don't want to take time and teach you and give you a whole lecture. On the internet, on YouTube, there are a lot of videos that explain fully in detail what we do. So we are a network of young people between the ages of 19 and 29 who are selected on the basis of how exceptional we are at what we do. So I'll give an example. The MC is a doctor. He's one of the leading young activists shaping the health of the country. But what is your position exactly?
The Secretary General of Zimbabwe's Association.
So he's shaping health. Another shaper is in Tabisi. He's shaping media. He runs a company called On The Media. At 26, he has productions on ZBC. He's doing exceptionally well. Another shaper is an entrepreneur who runs a plumbing company. He's doing exceptionally well and tackling agendas that not so many people want to tackle. There are a lot of people like that in Zimbabwe, and not only in Zimbabwe, but also all around Africa and in the world. So we invite you guys to apply, take time to meet the shapers. We have an upcoming application process and interview process that will be coming in the next 2 weeks. So please apply. We don't like it when people, side eye us at such events. Please apply, be part of the change, be part of the shaping. It's nothing exceptional. We just want you as you are. Just come to join other young people who are doing exactly what you're doing. So on that note, thank you so much. I don't know where Madam Vice Curator is going to share some gifts for our panelists. She left with Mr. Lewis. Okay. So we just wanted as a token of appreciation. We're non-profit. Let me just give that disclaimer. We don't have big budgets, but as a token of our appreciation, Mr. Lewis.
Yes, I did.
Oh, you've given, yes. We just wanted to say thank you. Luni, unfortunately, you are in our hub. You won't be getting anything. Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
Thank you. You need to explain to us, Brown and Father.
When I'm going to have a one-on-one session.
With the young people. Okay. We'll invite. So he's booked for the Meet the Leader. Thank you so much, Mr. Lewis. Thank you. It's hard to find female panelists. Can I tell you something? It's hard to find female panelists. And even if you do find them, tell us what's grilling you on this issue. They are either very busy or very skeptical. So to find women who come on our panels every time. Last time we had one woman who came last minute. We invited, we sent invitations every week. It's hard to find female panelists. So for your courage, thank you so much. You are precious. We hope to see more of you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the American space. We are the global shapers. You are young people. Let's continue shaping Bulawayo. It is our city. We need to take ownership. We can't leave it to the panelists or people in some office or in some authority. It is our city and we need to continue taking responsibility. I'd like to thank our beautiful partners, CNC Media. They came We are live on YouTube if you didn't know. If you say something naughty, you captured. Someone is watching you somewhere. Thank you so much to CMC Media. We'd like to thank the American Space for being so supportive of our efforts as young people. We'd like to thank you, each and every one of you, for taking time off your busy schedule on a Tuesday, 3 to 4. It's unheard of. So thank you so much. Let's network, make a friend, find a babe, find a mentor, find a business partner. Oh, sorry, before we leave, can you take a group photo? Yeah, just here. This is one group photo. Oh, and also, if you didn't fill in your name,